Now to our U.S. Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, good morning. And of course, a busy night, I suppose, for you as well. But with the scenes that we've seen of this insurrection in the capital, it wasn't unexpected. So how did we come to this?
Well, certainly a lot of questions, Sakina, about how the Capitol Police and local law enforcement, including support from the National Guard, allowed this breach to happen. This is one of the most secure buildings anywhere in the United States, just given the times in which we live in. And you had thousands breach that security perimeter, and hundreds certainly entering the halls of Congress, running amok. You saw pictures there of people sitting in the presiding officer's chair in the Senate chamber, in Nancy Pelosi's office. And it seems they were just allowed to access to the building. Of course, this was a day when both sittings of the houses of Congress were to affirm the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden. That process was underway. Of course, the president, the outgoing president, Donald Trump, inviting a lot of his supporters to Washington on the January 6th to stage these protests. But I don't think anyone really had any idea that it would develop as it did. There is now talk, Sakina, certainly within within lawmaker avenues and certainly in their quarters, about invoking the 25th Amendment. Essentially, the 25th Amendment allows the vice president with a majority of members of cabinet to remove the president from office if they deem him to be unfit. Of course, we are hearing that this process was first reported by CBS News, that this process is underway. There hasn't been a formal application of the 25th Amendment, but certainly discussions around this. We're also hearing about possible impeachment of the president because they believe he stoked these actions by his supporters. So certainly a lot happening in Washington as the process, of course, to affirm Joe Biden's victory in the Electoral College continues. Congress, both houses reconvening to take up certain objections from Republican lawmakers. But that process in terms of the Constitution, to affirm Joe Biden's win in terms of that Electoral College victory is now underway. And of course, as we move slowly towards January 20th, when he will be sworn into office as the next president of the United States.
And of course, Sherwin, many people questioning the wisdom of this at a time when we are literally, days away from the president-elect Joe Biden being sworn in. But what does this mean for the dynamics within the Republican Party? Because President Donald Trump seeing some of the senior members of that party now going against him and speaking out against this attempted coup or the insurrection or whatever it is that you choose to call it.
I mean, a lot of people are saying, Sakina, that, for people like Mitch McConnell and various Republican senators and members of the House that are now, as you say, criticizing the actions that they saw play themselves out in Washington and the actions of this president, that perhaps a coup was a bridge too far. But it certainly has taken them a lot to be able to criticize this president. I mean, very talk of invoking the 25th Amendment, this would be an action that would have to be enforced, essentially led by the Vice President Mike Pence, who has been a very big and stable and loyal supporter of this president to date. We had a statement earlier from former President Barack Obama. He writes that history will rightly remember today's violence at the Capitol, incited by a sitting president who has continued to baselessly lie about the outcome of a lawful election, as a moment of great dishonor and shame for our nation. But we're kidding ourselves if we treat it as a total surprise, right? So a lot of people, certainly the former President of the United States, seeing this coming. George W. Bush also writing that he's appalled by the reckless behavior of some political leaders since the election and the lack of respect shown today for our institutions and our traditions of law enforcement. And then, of course, a number of senior Republican leaders, including Mitch McConnell, talking about how this was a bridge too far. Nancy Pelosi, talking about the fact that democracy would not be undermined by this. But the real questions that need to be answered, Sakina, is how did this happen? How could it have been allowed to happen? Certainly, the Capitol Hill, a very secure building, but also a symbol of American democracy that was desecrated in many ways. Buildings, walls and windows smashed, offices invaded, lawmakers that had to use gas masks that were under their seats in the House of Representatives, hiding and sheltering in place as these people roamed the halls amid a pandemic, of course. There were very strict rules for the joint sitting of both houses of Congress today in terms of social distancing and wearing masks. And of course, all that went up in the air when this invasion took place. And of course, the sad news, of course, now is that one of the protesters, a young woman, was shot. We don't know by whom. There hasn't been any clarity from the Capitol Police as to how this woman was shot in the neck. She was rushed to hospital, died at a local hospital. So a lot of unanswered questions here as we move into the new day.
And just finally, Sherwin, people questioning where was law enforcement? Because, as you said, the outgoing President Trump had invited protesters to come and protest since he hasn't accepted defeat as yet from last November's election. But where was law enforcement? People questioning the sort of law enforcement that we saw turn out for Black Lives Matter protests. Where were they?
Yeah, that's the question a lot of people are asking right now. It's not like they weren't forewarned. The president had been tweeting, inviting his supporters to the nation's capital to place political pressure on the legislators that were debating whether to object or approve the Electoral College votes. Essentially a process where the state electors had been certified by the states, sent to Congress for a rubber stamp, essentially a ceremonial event that was due to take place, but certainly they were appraised as to the threats that were coming. There were thousands of people that descended on Washington, D.C., and subsequently, of course, the mayor of D.C. instituting a curfew from 6 p.m. Wednesday night until 6 a.m. Thursday morning. But certainly questions that will be asked moving forward. Where was Capitol Police? Why was the National Guard not deployed, given the threats that were posed by a number of President Trump supporters that everybody knew were descending on Washington, D.C.?
Sherwin Bryce-Pease, let's leave it there. Thanks so much for that update on the situation in the United States. Well, we